Solution Talk, Revolutionizing with Greener Reefer, Scaling Low-Emission Reefer Solutions. Please welcome your host from Kuehne Climate Center, Mark Major.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon to talk about Greener Reefers, a more interesting topic than it might first seem. So I'm Mark Major from the Kuehne Climate Center, part of the Kuehne Foundation, and you're welcome today on behalf of the Greener Reefer Transition Alliance. The Greener Reefer Transition Alliance was formed by the Kuehne Climate Center and the GIZ, the German Development Corporation, to bring together stakeholders to reflect and think about this transition ahead for maritime containers. You're very welcome. We're going to have a 45-minute panel discussion. We have 4 guests. So we have Didier Biaget from Thermo King. We have Melanie Golding from the South African Maritime Safety Agency. We have Otto Schacht, who is an advisor to the Kuehne Foundation. And we have Kerstin Oschluck from GIZ, the German Development Corporation. So as words of introduction, on the one side, we have this fantastic international freight transport system where these containers are moving a huge amount of goods efficiently, safely across the world at incredible scale. And we all benefit from this. If you've had an avocado or a banana, you benefit from this almost every day. This cargo is being moved in refrigerated containers. But of course, not just fruit and vegetables, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, laptop batteries. There's many things that are transported in maritime containers. So there's about 2.5 million of these containers moving around the world, with quite a high growth rate. So the trade, maritime reefer trade is growing 7-10% per year, much faster than the rest of the container fleet. So the share of the containers is growing as well. But on the other side, these containers have negative environmental impacts. And particularly if we think about the refrigerants, these refrigerants that are currently being used have very high global warming potential, 4,500 times that of CO2, depending a little bit on the refrigerant. And they also contain these forever chemicals, PFAS, as well. So we are trying to convene this discussion, and the key questions is which should be the next refrigerant? Which should we switch to? There are natural refrigerants available with one global warming potential of basically of 1, also without PFAS. So which refrigerant do you transfer to, and when should it be done? Should this be done in the short term, the medium term, and the long term? So this is a little bit the discussion we're trying to foster with our alliance. So I'd first like to come to you, Didier. Maybe you could just briefly introduce Thermo King and your work there.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So first, Thermo King is part of Trend Technologies, and Trend Technologies is a global climate innovator. And as such, we are really working on transforming the way that the world is using our solution for heating, ventilation, and cooling, building, homes, and transport refrigeration. Our purpose is to boldly change what's possible for a sustainable world. So with this, we are leading our market, and we are setting up a new target for our growth through sustainability. So I mentioned about Thermo King, obviously, our brand. So with Thermo King, we are really electrifying the entire cold chain, and we are making sure that we are developing a zero direct emission solution across our entire portfolio. Our portfolio is made of a refrigeration system for road transportation, so truck and trailer, also for marine, and that's what we are discussing now. Also air container, and we are doing also HVAC system for passenger transportation for rail and bus. So I mentioned about our portfolio. So now within our portfolio at Thermo King, we have those marine refrigeration systems, so-called reefer. And those units are kind of unique because they can reoperate at different set points from minus 30 degrees to plus 30 degrees. And even more important, operating at very different ambient conditions up to plus 50. And this is really important when we'll discuss after that about the choice of the refrigerant. Those containers are also on vessels that are in transit for several weeks. And during this time, we really need to ensure that we have an accurate temperature control of the container itself so that we can ensure that the good quality of the good that we are transporting. And it's important that we are working at the best efficiency possible so that we maximize or lower maximize the efficiency and lower the operating cost. So we will then discuss, as you mentioned, that we have this Greener Reefer project. And this is really an activity as a proof of concept for us to see if there's a safe way of bringing a natural refrigerant in an efficient way also. And we relying on this project that we have to bring the evidence that's possible or not possible then.
Okay. And what are the main challenges in introducing these refrigerants in a safe way?
Mm-hmm. So first, I want to mention that at Thermo King, we are actively working today on bringing already a low GWP solution with the 1234YF.
Global warming potential.
Global warming potential, yeah, value of reducing that global warming potential. And bringing this 1234YF refrigerant that has a global warming potential of less than 1 now, as per the latest IPCC assessment. So this YF, so-called, is a refrigerant which is widely used. It's in the automotive industry today. So every car's got air conditioning with a 1234YF refrigerant today. It's classified as A12, so mildly flammable. But as I said, I mean, it's widely used. We've done in the automotive industry all the risk assessment to make this judgment that this refrigerant was safe to use. And we see some shipping line already using 1234YF on some of the reefers. After that, when we start discussing about the transition to a further step, right, to a natural refrigerant, before going there, I think it's important to know that when we speak about the CO2 emission of a marine container, so 90% of those emissions are coming from the operation of the system itself, and 10% are coming from the refrigerant. So when we speak about the CO2 emission, the GWP is important, but we have also to look at the overall efficiency of the system, because as I said, 90% is coming from this operation of the marine reefer. So now, what are the alternatives that we have when we speak about natural refrigerants? So the first one that we have is ammonia. We have ammonia, R744, also called CO2, and then the R290, also called propane. Starting with ammonia. So ammonia is a pretty good refrigerant, good properties. The only issue is that it's rated as classified as B2L, so B meaning high toxicity, and that's a challenge which is quite difficult to overcome. Then we go to the R744 or CO2, and this is a safe refrigerant to use, even though it operates at a slightly higher pressure. We're speaking about 120, 130 bars of operating pressure, so that's something that needs to be mitigated. But the concern or the drawback of this refrigerant is really on the efficiency, and we see a drop of efficiency with the CO2, and it's dropping even more when we start entering into the high ambient temperature. So I was speaking at the beginning about our marine reefer operating in the range of up to plus 50 degrees. At that stage, then the efficiency of the CO2 is significantly dropping. Can be recovered somehow, but not fully. So then the third option that we have is the R290 with propane. And this is a great refrigerant, great properties. So we can, with this refrigerant, really improve the efficiency of the system and gain some performance and efficiency there. But then the main obstacle or challenge to overcome is the flammability. It's classified as A3 as per the ASHRAE classification, so meaning highly flammable. And this is really the risk that needs to be overcome, and that's really the purpose of that project, of the Greener Reefer project that we're having, is really doing that risk assessment to conclude whether there is or not a safe way of using the propane for the marine application.
Okay, thank you. So this brings us on very logically to you and your role at the South African Maritime Safety Agency. So maybe briefly you can explain the work of the agency.
Thank you, Mark. The South African Maritime Safety Authority, we are a maritime authority. We are mandated with 3 things, mainly to ensure safety of life and property at sea, to protect the marine environment from pollution, whether it be from oil spills or even from emissions, and also to foster a resilient and inclusive maritime sector. That is what we do. We're a public entity under the Department of Transport. We are fully aligned with South Africa's nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement and even with the IMO 2023 GHG strategy, as well as the net zero framework. So we are fully aligned with that, and we are making sure that our emission reduction strategies, they fully contribute towards the targets that are being set while ensuring just transition. Yesterday, we had our Minister of Innovation, Trade and Competition, who was here presenting. And 3 things that came strongly from him was that as we are going forward with our efforts of decarbonizing the maritime sector, we want to make sure as South Africa that our efforts, they are sustainable, they are equitable, and they ensure a just transition. So in our regulatory work, that is one of the things that we're actually focusing on. And right now, obviously, the issue of decarbonization is at the core of what we are doing in terms of protecting the marine environment. What we are currently doing together with the Department of Transport, we're in the process of developing a national action plan to address maritime decarbonization. And what we are doing now, we are lobbying to incorporate the Greener Reefers initiative as part of our national action plan. So that is something we are very excited about as part of the regulatory work that we are doing. And we also enable innovation. As part of doing our work, we've noticed that it results in a lot of efficiencies when we embrace innovation. So projects like the Greener Reefers for us, because of the innovative aspect, and that it is aligned also with what the net zero framework strives to achieve in terms of enabling technologies that are greener. So this is a project that it's very close to our heart. It is aligned with our national climate objectives also as a country, and also in line with the strategy that we are developing as part of the National Action Plan.
Yeah. And South Africa is also an important hub in terms of container trade as well. So it's a key actor. So specifically when it comes to Greener Reefers, what do you see as kind of the opportunities for you nationally in this transition?
I think for us, a key opportunity, it is what it strives to achieve. For example, in terms of capacity building. This is a huge opportunity for underdeveloped economies like South Africa to now be empowered in terms of the investment in technology, even in terms of the investment in training and skills. With the GIZ, we are quite honored that there is already training that is scheduled to take place in South Africa this year, in Cape Town as well as in Durban. So, and had it not been for a Greener Reefer initiative, we probably wouldn't have had this opportunity for us to be empowered. It's also, we are also seeing it as an opportunity of uplifting our staff, because now they get to be upskilled. They probably know how to handle your normal traditional reefers, but now here is an opportunity for them to be empowered with new technologies, with new skills, which in fact will actually work out for them in the long run. What we are also, what we are taking advantage of now as part of the Greener Reefer initiative, a huge opportunity that has come for us. We are developing a national maritime skills academy right now, because we've noticed that we need a new generation of greener technicians, greener maritime experts. And this is something that we wouldn't have thought of had it not been for the Greener Reefer initiative. So for us, there's quite a whole lot of opportunities. And from the engagements that we've been having with the sector, just as we try to introduce the topic, we are noticing that especially from developing economies, they are raising concerns around finance. So we have now used this opportunity to use our role and our power as a regulator to start the facilitation of access to funds for small operators in developing economies, so that they can embrace the concept of going green, because we are also doing our part to give them that access from a facilitation perspective, both for skills transfer, for capacity building initiatives, and also just for general empowerment, which contributes to what our minister spoke about, that the transition must be inclusive, it must be sustainable, and it must achieve a just transition for Africa. And that's exactly what this, the opportunity that is being presented by the Greener Reefer initiative.
Great, thank you. So this brings us to you, Kirsten. You're the head of the project, the Greener Reefer projects for GIZ. And maybe you can, as a bilateral development organization, can you maybe explain what you're trying to achieve with this Greener Reefers project?
Absolutely. Thank you very much also. And also thanks to Ms. Golding for the statement. It's very heartwarming to hear also that we could spark more ideas and supporting in your course in South Africa. So for those who maybe are not aware about it, the German Development Corporation is an institution implementing the German policies regarding in the Global South starting in the 1970s. My project, the Greener Reefer, is part of a cluster called Pro Klima. We are supporting countries in the Global South, also South Africa, now for over 30 years to comply with the Montreal Protocol requirements. So it's a focus on refrigerants and also supporting the countries for natural refrigerants in the sense of policies, but also technology transfer and capacity building. So especially what Ms. Golding mentioned regarding capacity building and trainings, technicians for refrigerants, natural refrigerants, is one of our main activities. And this Greener Reefer project has started 1.5 years ago. We are aiming especially to supporting South Africa and Costa Rica, that creating the skills in the countries to maintain reefers with flammables. So as DT already mentioned, there are propane is like a natural refrigerant with almost no negative impacts besides it's flammable. But this is a risk which is possible by design, but also by safety guidelines to manage. In Europe, we have, for example, R290, so propane and heat pumps, which is in every household already available, and no one thinks about it, that it's propane, which is flammable. And we are one of our success stories with collaborating with the private sector and countries, for example, the first FCKW, so HFC-free fridge. And we are hoping to get the reefer also to be such a success story in the collaboration with the countries, because what we are also seeing is in the shipping industry, it's not a speedboat. So every idea needs ages, seems like. And there are also some blind spots by the shipping industry, which are maybe also normal. So where we are coming in supporting national authorities to get their technician on speed. To maintain these reefers, also the existing ones, so to reduce the leakage rate. And we are very honored also that the German Ministry for the Environment, through the International Climate Initiative, saw this opportunity to step into this technology transition and also innovation. Because right now there are some stories also experienced by other manufacturers to tap into this R290 area, but we are very lucky to collaborate with Thermo King for now pushing forward, because I think now is the time. And then having SAMSA on board and also with the Kuehne Climate Center, I think we are right now, it's the time for the change.
Okay. One part of the project I know is this physical demonstration. Can you explain a little bit about what is planned with the physical demonstration of these containers?
So one part, as you mentioned, is the physical demonstration, which we are developing with Thermo King, but also with the Technical University in Valencia. So we're also very proud to have also educational and research institutes on board for this. We are planning to have the first prototype in the end of the year, also to do the lab test so that we can prove that actually a Greener Reefer, also with the improved box, so it's about the insulation, reducing no blowing agents, which are also containing F gases, have a reduced energy consumption of minus 20%. And this is also a good argument for...
Less leakage, right? And more efficient insulation.
Yes. Absolutely. And if there is leakage, because it's a maritime environment, which means there is hard handling, for example, there is the maritime conditions are quite tough for metal and aluminium and copper and everything around. So there is leakage. It's a fact. But propane, if there is a leakage, there's no ozone or global warming potential, because it's a natural refrigerant. Okay. But besides this, we are also working on an eco label, which will also support the shipping industry to become greener, so that we have certain scales regarding the refrigerant, but also the box. There is then a common standard. So also yesterday, where also your minister spoke regarding hydrogens, is a huge request by the private sector to have standards, to have a common language to understand. So yeah, we are very proud in this project to have the prototype development. We have the capacity buildings, to increase green jobs in our partner countries, Costa Rica and South Africa, and maybe also other countries, and the eco-label.
Okay, and you mentioned the lab testing of the prototype, you know, proving it in a controlled conditions. Will it also be tested at sea?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
we are working on this, and please stay tuned when we are informing more about the next steps in this regards next year.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now we come to you, Otto. You're an advisor to the Kuehne Foundation, but we particularly invited you today because, of course, you've got decades of experience working, with Hapag-Lloyd as a container line carrying reefer containers, but also with Kuehne + Nagel in the business of as a logistics. So from a commercial perspective, how will the liner operators and the logistics server, how will they be looking at this transition?
Yeah, Mark, thanks for being here. Okay, a couple of things. Like what you mentioned in the beginning, the reefer business is growing faster than dry cargo. So it's becoming more and more important for the ocean carriers because more foodstuffs are moved around the world. Secondly, the majority of the fruits are coming actually from two continents. They're coming from South America and from Africa. So that's about 80% of all global fruit trade. And we are dealing there with very big shippers in the world, which are known as brands, whether it's the Chiquitas of this world, the Doles, and then you have a lot of traders in between. So I think this initiative, and I think, Kerstin, what you said earlier, the industry is a very conservative industry. And the energy efficiency of shipping and the key focus is, of course, of replacing the present fuels for running the vessels, but also the energy being used, what you mentioned earlier, for the reefer containers. There's a lot of energy being used. So there's a big focus on this. So I think now the last initiative, replacing the refrigerant, and I must say also for me, it was until you approached me on this subject a couple of years ago, was new to me that there's this leakage. So when we now start to talk to shippers on this subject, we get a pretty good reception on the subject. Because also for a lot of shippers, this was not known. So we believe if we convince people on this subject, this will get a higher, more attention than in the past.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the industry is used to dealing with changing technologies, is used to dealing with flammable products, is used to dealing with. So this is not a new kind of transition. Okay.
No, and the good news is actually, and I think this is important to know, we talk very few players in this industry. So we have, you mentioned it earlier, we have about 2.2 million reefer containers in the world. 70% of those are managed by 4 or 5 carriers. Mm-hmm. And we have 3, 4 equipment providers only. So we actually have only 10 people at the table who have to make this transition. Mm-hmm. So it's a start. That's why I think carriers will support this initiative. The only thing, it will take a while because all reefer containers which are being built today, and the industry is building about 200 to 300,000 reefer containers per year. They have a lifetime of about 15 to 20 years. So all containers which are being produced today mm-hmm. will probably not be usable for propane. So we talk when propane comes, only then the new reefers will be used for propane or CO2, but probably more propane.
Yeah, and we produced a white paper on this topic earlier in the year, and that's exactly, we did a number of scenarios, of course. You can look at different scenarios for introducing this, different technologies at different speeds to work out what the climate benefits would be. Okay. I wanted to come back to you mentioned that people weren't aware, even the carriers weren't so aware about this, the leakage and the environmental impacts of these refrigerants. You mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4 YF as a possible way forward, but this refrigerant contains PFAS, right? These forever chemicals. So these are on the way to be banned in Europe. The process is on its way. Are you not worried that this is a transition towards something which will again then you'll be quickly in another phase of transformation when they're banned?
Well, this is not a statement, right? It's a possibility that YF falls into the bans, but it's not granted.
Sure, it's ongoing process.
So that's why I think that the YF is still a viable solution that we have today. But that's why also we need to look further and look at the potential natural refrigerant And that's why we are here. It's really to evaluate what would be then the best direction to take. And as I was saying earlier, when we do this change, it's important that we look at the entire efficiency and the GWP of the refrigerant itself. And that's really important that we take all this in the equation when making that choice of the refrigerant.
Yeah. So interestingly, so we've talked about the safety aspects, these environmental aspects, but none of you have mentioned the kind of the cost so far. So, I mean, I know you've made clear that the testing is ahead. You need to look into the risks and the design question. But do you have the feeling this is going to be an expensive transition?
Well, first, like Otto said, it will be a long transition, right? Because as Otto said, there are 2.2 million of refrigerated container on the in service, and then we have a replacement rate in the range of 5% per year. And going to a natural refrigerant solution, it's not economically or technically very feasible to think about a retrofit of the unit that we have in service. So this transition will have to be done through the newly built container. So that will take time to get the full transition. But now if we go to the cost itself, there are some investment costs that needs to be done up front to finance the R&D, right? Because this new development is completely new field in terms of refrigerant. We need to look at the safety measures that needs to be taken. We need to work closely with the regulatory for all the compliance. There's significant training to be done within the entire value chain, right? From the engineering, because the engineering we need to do the SOMRAD, the risk assessment, but then also anyone touching the unit, the worker that operate the unit, the service maintenance technician. So this will add some cost. And then on the system itself, there are some additional sensor, the additional safety measure that will need to be taken into account. So it will drive additional cost. But there's a point that I mentioned earlier is that with propane, we can gain in efficiency. And we can then compensate some of the upfront investment with a lower operating cost of the unit itself. So that can rebalance the cost of that transition. To be taken also into consideration that it's an investment to be done for a better sustainable solution and working on toward the
and this includes the more efficient box design as well, right? So this is
exactly so that can
energy as another
come on top of the
and we can make the assumption that the new maritime fuels will at least initially be more expensive, right? So that's another driver of this benefit. I think is it 40 or 50% of port energy consumption is the reefer power. It's a very significant part of port energy consumption when they're being stored. Okay, Otto, what do you think about the costs of this?
I think it's a good subject, cost, because the good news is here, whatever the cost is, whether it's in the end per voyage of $400, $500, $1,000 more. And we made some calculation. I think we are coming up with a cost calculator on this subject also in this respect. So even if you take a high cost of $1,000 per voyage, if you now think what's in the container, and we have in a container about 28,000 avocados, or we have 110,000 bananas in a container, reefer container. So if you have $1,000 more cost, we talk about 1 cent. 1 cent extra cost for the end consumer. And that's what we always said in shipping, actually, because shipping transportation is in container is so cheap. Whether you move bananas, whether you move avocados, whether you move Nike sneakers, or whatever around the world. If you take green fuels or you take green refrigerants, which make it in the beginning till we have, let's say, till we really can scale it up, it will make it a little more expensive. The end consumer will not feel it. And there are few industries in the world where you can have a transition to green fuels where the end consumer will not see the impact.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, this is another aspect of the project, is that we're preparing a carbon cost calculator for this transition to answer exactly this question, like different choices of fuels, different assumptions about improvements, energy, different fuel costs. What is going to be the cost per avocado or per trainer or per? So this should have this in the next couple of months. So this will inform this discussion, and that will be an online tool that will be publicly available. So.
Sorry, I would expect the return on investment, right, to be part of the outcome of this Greener Reefer that we are conducting with GIZ.
And then as we get more data from your assessment and from the demonstration, then of course this can inform different factors in the cost calculation.
Maybe just to shed a little bit more light regarding the costs, because we were talking about the research and development costs, we talk about the trainings and skills, but they have to be done. It doesn't matter if the industry decides to go with YF, because it's also flammable, or R290. But the beauty of propane is actually it's available globally. In every harbor, there will be propane available for a cheap price in comparison to YF. So it's like, from our point of view as a development corporation, seeing the reality in, for example, South Africa or Costa Rica. For us, it's like a no-brainer to go with natural refrigerants, because we are also supporting countries now for over 30 years successfully. So I understand there are like certain economic reasons for certain players to explore YF. Yes, it's used in a mobile air conditioning systems, but also the automobile industry is ready to switch to natural refrigerants. So that's for us like one of the arguments when it comes to cost, that propane is cheap, and it stays cheap as long as we are still exploring oil.
And of course, that would mean one transition rather than a temporary transition, then another transition.
Yeah,
so
doing a leapfrog.
Yeah. So I realize there's lots of like chemical terminology and lots of numbers and letters, which can be confusing if you're not so used to it. But this is the purpose of the white paper. We tried to write this down in really clearly, all the different features of the different refrigerants and then common names, so that to make this more understandable for the broader audience. So I really encourage you to have a look at the white paper. You mentioned all the things that South Africa is doing nationally, your work on training, your work on regulation, your work in your national policy, which is kind of quite impressive. So, what would be your message to other national authorities around the world? What would you like to see other national authorities do to support this? You can't make this transition on your own, right?
Yeah.
You need others to stand up with you. So what would your message be to other national regulators?
I think for us, key right now, we happen to also sit in the African Association of Maritime Authorities, where we actually have a whole lot of group of maritime administrators within Africa. And we are going to see how we can take advantage of the platform just to at least start the engagement, to start the dialogue. And I think what I'm realizing, especially from an African context, is Africa is ready. We are ready. We are willing to be part of the process. I don't think there's resistance. Obviously, there would be some things that we need from a sector. For example, fair access to finance, training, sustainability, and sharing and collaboration. We do need some things, but I think we would implore on all the other stakeholders, especially the maritime authorities and other stakeholders as well, to embrace the Greener Reefer initiative, to embrace all the initiatives that are coming to ensure the decarbonization of the shipping sector. What we are actively doing right now, we are in the process of submitting an information paper to the IMO, so that
International Maritime Organization.
So that the discussions around greener refrigerants can be elevated within the IMO structures, because we've noticed that there's still some time. I mean, you mentioned 15, 20 years as a life cycle of a reefer, and that the current ones will not probably be ready, but the newer generation might be ready. So it gives us enough time now to start the groundwork of making sure that the framework, the regulatory framework that is required, at least we can start the process now. Then when the 15, 20 years life cycle comes to an end, the regulation is also ready. And we also implore on the other regulators in particular to start the awareness sessions. I don't think everyone fully understands the dangers, both from an environment perspective and from a health perspective, of the PFAS. I've learned a new word, PFAS, the forever chemicals. I don't think everyone fully understands that. Yep. And I think once people start understanding that, and it comes from us as the regulators, that we are part of doing the engagement, it becomes easier to actually accept, because it's something that is good. So what we've realized now, we are developing what we call a South African Maritime Emissions Database, to basically show the benefit of doing this, because once we are able to measure our emissions and we have a transparent reporting, I think when people are looking at that and the perceived costs, they will be convinced, because they'll be able to see that actually they can see the good when the reporting is transparent. So we are also imploring on the other maritime authorities as well to be transparent as well, in terms of making sure that the awareness is there, everyone understands what you are doing, why you are doing it, and not just focus on the perceived negatives, be it price, be it resources, but the good definitely outweighs the bad.
Great. So, Milenia, she mentioned this access to financing. Is that something, that you're going to be thinking about as you develop the project, this access to financing or de-risking the access to financing?
We are happy to explore these opportunities with our counterparts, also because the access to finance needs to be national tailored, but also that like the institutions are understanding what is needed. So we are happy to be like the interim person to this and supporting, for example, SAMSA or other national stakeholders to have access to these finance opportunities.
Okay. So, did at the beginning, Otto was focusing on the safety question. Do you think that's a big concern for the carriers, the operators?
Okay, in the beginning, yes. Once we are through with the training initially, test phases, I think it will become very normal. So, but in the beginning, there will be a transition. And who do we have to train? We have to train people in the ports. And having talked to carriers on this, the ports are actually not the biggest concern. There are not that many ports in the world, so also that you can
and
manage.
they're used to handling dangerous goods.
And they used to handle dangerous goods, exactly. What is a bigger concern, and I think what you also mentioned, when you talk in Africa and in South America, most of these reefer containers are not being packed in very professional environments, because very often they are being moved in a banana plantation. So you have to train a lot of people locally when those containers are being packed there. Because they now all of a sudden you talk about a different entity, this container coming there in the banana plantation. You have to make sure that the door is open, because the container is being cooled for, pre-cooled, moving in there. You have to open the door, leave it open for about 2 minutes. So you have to train a lot of people locally. And that will be, but I believe this will come, but we have enough time for this. So eventually carriers will adopt this. And I think, just to mention this, I think what is so important that we need support from the regulator. And we have seen it now with the IMO agreement on the CO2 emissions in shipping in general. The earlier, of course, the regulator puts pressure on the industry also on this subject, the earlier the industry will move. And I think we have to create awareness. A lot of regulators are not aware of this subject. When the Montreal Protocol on HCF, there was at one point worldwide a decision, and we need the same here in shipping in this respect.
And the IMO are not even counting these
Exactly.
These leakage emissions in their accountability. Very good. So the time is going super fast. Hopefully we've caught most of the main points here. I don't know if there's like a really burning question from anyone in the room, like, is there some aspect of this that we're missing, or some key thing that you've not? So if not, we've got about 7 minutes left, I think. So I would invite each of you in turn to kind of make your final statement, and any point that you feel we've missed for the record before we close. So Didier, let you go first.
Look, as I said, I think for us the most important is this risk assessment and risk analysis. So it's important that we have all of the players re-engage into this activity and providing feedback. I think it's good that we have partnership in the early development with GIZ, for instance, but we need also the shipping line and the leasing company to weigh in and to give us their view of the risk assessment and the different situation where we need, like you were just bringing one situation, right, Otto, on the loading of the container. So we need to re-look at all those specific cases and have a strong risk mitigation for each of these. So really to ensure that we can operate safely.
And this was one of the motivations for us to create this kind of Greener Reefer Transition Alliance, to create a broader space. I mean, of course, you have relationships with your customers, but to create a broader space with regulators, with experts, with academia, to create a broader space for this reflection. So hopefully we can get more container lines on board and have broader discussion. Thank you.
Yes,
What would be your final reflections on this?
my final reflections, we do expect that the stakeholders, in particular the shipping lines, they might be concerned about safety, understandably so. And I think that's why we are now playing our part as a regulator to make sure that at some point we end up having global conventions around this. I was happy to note that the Greener Reefers that are being prototyped at the moment, they are developed in line with the ISO standards. So already the fact that we are using something that we can trust being an ISO standard, now we need to take it a step further as well to make sure that the regulatory framework is there, both nationally and globally. So that's going to be a key thing that we are going to be pushing, at least as SAMSA, in as far as we can actually assist. And I think also, for us as SAMSA, we are in full support of the Greener Reefer initiative. As I indicated, it is fully in line with both the South African NDC, in line with our National Action Plan in its current draft form, and it is in line with our climate development objectives. And I'm hoping that working together, we can make sure that the coal sector is not just greener, but it's also fairer, it's more resilient, and it is also inclusive.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned this idea of getting some kind of global regulation. Of course, that would be, a long pathway and a huge effort to get kind of a global regulation this. And this comes back to Otto's point at the beginning. So if there's only 5 manufacturers and 8 shipping lines, that's 13 people that could agree to do this.
Yes.
So, I mean, I see one route is you could try and get global rules, which would involve decades of negotiation. Okay, that certainly could work. Or you just try and get agreement between the 13 companies that basically are controlling this. So I see 2 ways to take this forward. But I think many people will be grateful that you're stepping forward on this, that you've traveled to be with us here, and your effort, your leadership on this topic. So thank you.
Thank you
very much for that. Kirsten.
My takeaway from this discussion is actually that first of all, there's leadership in this room already. And also it's amazing to hear all these very positive statements. Of course, there are concerns. It's a new technology. And a Greener Reefer will be safe. It will have a high energy efficiency. And it will be the future for the maritime transport. And it will support the whole cold chain. So also all the aspects what we discussed, that even the farmers are understanding what's going on with the reefer, that the seafarer understand what's going on with the reefer, that they have the knowledge also in the ports and terminals wherever this reefer is going to be. It will be in Europe, it will be in Asia, it will be in Africa, and then next day in Latin America. This is the aim and this is the future, and I'm very happy to support and be part of this alliance and to contribute and work with all of you together in this.
Okay. And how can people in the audience kind of follow a little bit the work and what's going on? So, I mean, I know the Greener Reefer Transition Alliance, we have a LinkedIn page. So I would encourage you to follow that. That's the way you can passively follow the news of the demonstration, the news of the technical work, the training. So please follow the Greener Reefer Transition Alliance LinkedIn page. And I think we'll post information there also about the demonstration as well, right? So
absolutely.
Okay.
And also part of the Pro-Klima cluster from GIZ side, we will publish regular articles also regarding around refrigerants. So also please check out this website, and you see probably here the flyers also for more information.
Yeah. And of course, the great thing about that is, of course, you can comment, you can ask questions, right? If you want to, you can interact. So please join that. And of course, this alliance is open. So anyone here that has an interest in this, whether you're a regulator, a business, an academic, an expert, please speak to us. Lydia here, she's leading on that work for us. Please speak to us. We're keen to make it bigger. Just thinking again about this industry concentration, we had a networking event yesterday for the Greener Reefer Alliance, and we calculated that the companies in the room, you weren't able to be with us, the companies in the room collectively control about 50% So already in one small networking event, we have almost half. So maybe next year we can have the ambition to have the whole representatives of the whole industry in the room. So do that. Okay, Otto, the last 90 seconds.
Okay.
What's your final takeaway? We've got 90 seconds.
So let me finalize with a positive statement. The good news is when you talk to those 6, 7 carriers who eventually buy the equipment, all the people responsible for buying the equipment, they all know eventually we will have natural refrigerants. They all know this is coming.
Yeah.
So it's not anymore, will it come or will it not come? It will come.
When?
It's only when and the time frame.
Yeah.
So the good news is it's coming. Me personally, I'm not happy it takes too long. But if one is realistic, probably like the IMO targets, we talk to all reefer containers worldwide are being replaced with natural refrigerants. We talk easily 25 years. This is not negative. It's unfortunately that it has to do with this long transition. But eventually it will come.
Very good. So thank you all. I hope this was interesting and made this topic, which it can seem quite dull on the outside, maybe hopefully it came to life for you. You can see why it's interesting. So thank you for your attention and thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
you.